Happy Sunday, everybody. This is Lisa in Connecticut. I am out on my back deck working on a batch of bedding for my worms. And before I mix the contents together, I wanted to give you a little view of what I put in my bedding, which can vary every time, but there's some standard components. So let's get down here. I mixed some before I decided to make the video, so I will explain what you see. This is a combination of shredded cardboard, mostly from Amazon, little smiles all ground up, and coconut coir. And you'll see also this light white paper is from standard newspaper. I don't subscribe to the paper, but we get a little weekly town paper that's distributed for free, so that goes in here. And there may be some mail in here, but I don't use the window envelopes because I'm too lazy to tear out the windows. And I don't use the shiny stuff because I have found that 2 or 3 times after putting it back into the bin, it comes back out again. So I just let my curbside recycling take that. What you see over here, and it is a very sunny day, so I'm going to have a hard time getting where you can see it without a shadow. The brown. This is right here, this is the aged 7-year-old horse manure that I've talked about in a few of my other videos, and there's a bucket of it right here. Mixed in with it, and you'll see a little bit over here, is some worm castings. Now, there's not a whole lot of worm castings, and the reason why is all of the worm castings I've collected over the winter have been used up in my garden. So right now I'm literally dipping into my bins to get castings. Dipping into my fresh castings is not a problem. Actually, as of today, I have 44 worm bins, plus my urban worm bag. So I think the worm bug has bitten me a lot harder than I ever expected. I knew I had a lot, but I hadn't counted them up because they're in different locations. So, well, then there's that. So yeah, while I can dip into my fresh castings, the problem is they are still in worm bins. And I took a couple of handfuls out today just to put in here, and I found several little teeny tiny hatchlings and a whole abundance of cocoons. Now, while they would hatch and thrive in here, the problem is they would hatch and thrive in here. My worm bins, all but 3, are single species only, meaning my African night crawlers are only African night crawlers. My Indian blue worms are only Indian blue worms. And I don't want to take bedding that is meant to be used by all my worms and add some of this to a worm bin, say it has euros in it, and there was cocoons of Indian blue worms, and the castings I added, they hatched, got into the bedding, and now when I add this to my euros or anything else, I've now introduced Indian blue worms. So I wanted to make sure that the castings was literally, I went through it with 3 fingers, crumbling it and inspecting it with a micro magnifying glass. So yeah, that was a pain in the butt, but it's not really a problem because I have so much horse manure that that's going to populate the bacteria. And I put that on a cookie sheet and I spread it out in the sun, so if there were any cocoons in it, because it also came with worms, they're no longer live. And then lastly, over here, there are 2 things. There's a combination of azomite, which if you're not familiar with, you can look it up. It is a volcanic rock powder loaded with trace minerals. Worms do not need this. It is something that when the worms eat it and it goes into the castings, it really enhances the castings. And lastly, what this is oyster shell flour. So this is the grit. And let me show you this product I found on Amazon. It's not that expensive. Oyster shell flour, 5 pounds. Organic, finely ground oyster shell. And as I'll show you, it is really, really fine. So it's an amazing grit. I don't eat that many eggs. My daughter brings over maybe a dozen eggshells a week. But when you have in excess of 40 worm bins, you need to do something for grit. And I usually buy the crushed oyster shells, but lately the pieces have been a little bit big. And for the small worms, well, they can't eat that. So let's run through that again. We have shredded cardboard, a lot. Coconut coir, not as much. Newspaper, a little bit. Medium, I don't know, maybe the equivalent of 3 whole newspapers. Some office paper, some aged horse manure, some worm castings, some azomite rock dust powder, some organic oyster shell flour, and you're going to see a little bit of green stuff floating around like here and throughout. I had a couple of herbs, potted herbs, rosemary and thyme, that were sitting out in the sun, and I failed to water them, and they died and got crunchy. So I said, what the heck, it's green. I'm going to crumble it up and put it in here. And I've added a bunch of water already. I paused. Yes, I paused the hose so I could do this video. I didn't stir everything up because I realized it would be a good opportunity to do the video. Let me get out of the sun here, or turn the other way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix it all up. And then there's one more thing I'm going to add. You see this bucket right here that looks pretty disgusting? These were clippings I took from my raspberry bushes probably a month ago. I was intending on planting them somewhere. I didn't. They're nasty. The water is nasty. There was a bunch of leaves below the water line that kind of rotted. Well, this water is so full of beneficial bacteria. It is also going to go in here. So I underwatered this, hoping that once I mix everything, I can add some of that nasty water, as I call it. It might be nasty to me. It won't be nasty to the worms. And if there are any mosquito larvae in it, which there probably is, it won't matter, because this material won't be wet enough for those mosquito larvae to continue to swim and develop and then turn into mosquitoes. They're going to die right away. And the worms can eat those too. So I am going to mix this up and show you the finished product. Okay, so I want to stop right here and show you this worm. And I recognize this worm as one of the common earthworm species we get in the area. And the only way it could have gotten in this bin, in this bedding, was through the horse manure that I added. So that tells me that even though I spread the horse manure on a cookie sheet and left it out in what is currently 81-degree sun, it didn't kill all the worms. So as I continue to mix this, I'm going to be super vigilant. This isn't a worm that's I'm worried about. It's not invasive. It's not going to take over my bedding if I have one. But if there's one, there may be two. And if there's two, they may bump into each other. And I don't want that. So I'm going to have to be super vigilant while I continue to mix. And also, when I do add this to my beds, I'm going to have to inspect it really well. Okay, all mixed up. Now what this is a 30-gallon Sterilite container. And this will last me a month, maybe longer. It's summertime, so I use a lot of leaves, wood chips, other like grass, things from my yard in my worm bins, so I don't rely on my pre-made bedding as much. If it looks a little wet, it is. And I leave it that way purposely because wetting cardboard wets the outside. Corrugated cardboard, you know, the flat sheet, ripple sheet, flat sheet stuff, that has glue in it. It's a cornstarch based glue, and that cornstarch takes several hours to fully absorb the liquid, and the rippled panel in corrugated cardboard also takes several hours to fully saturate. So if you mix your contents until they look just the right moisture level, when you come back the next day, it's going to be much too dry and you're going to have to add more water. And having done this so many times and learning that lesson, I now add extra water. Also, the horse manure is 100% dry. That takes time to soak up water as well. So while this is too wet for it right now, if I were to use it, within a day, the cardboard, newspaper, glue in the cardboard, and horse manure, and some of the coconut coir are going to have soaked up whatever extra moisture may be in here. And I may actually have to add a little bit more. Now, I want to say on this oyster shell flour, I showed that I added some in here as grit, and I did. What I added to this is not all that I'm going to be adding for grit. I don't add grit every time I feed my worms. I've done some reading on that, and 1 teaspoon every 3 months for an average worm bin is all they need. Worms have a crop and a gizzard, and the crop is part of the digestive system where they store the grit, and they use a very, very minuscule amount. So they're eating the grit, but they store it and they release it as is necessary. And the crop, part of that digestive function, it does break the grit down even further. So when they release it into their body, it's in even smaller particles than we feed it to them. So a little goes a long way. If you're someone who does a sprinkle of eggshells or crab shells or whatever you use every time you feed, that's okay. It's fine. It's not going to hurt the worms. It's not going to hurt your bin. It's not going to hurt anything, but it is absolutely not necessary. So, if you have, say, a 21-inch by 17 long by 4 or 6-inch high bus bin, a teaspoon every 3 months, or if you're running your bins on a 6 or 12-inch week cycle, a teaspoon at the beginning, and that's it, is more than enough. So don't feel as though you have to go crazy. So that's it. There's lots of healthy things between worm castings and horse manure and nasty plant water and some dead plants that probably had some life on it. Lots of healthy things in here that are going to flourish. The last thing I'm going to add to this is a touch of organic unsulfured molasses. Not enough to make it sticky, just enough to give the bacteria in here a food source to continue to grow on. I usually add alfalfa meal. I don't have any right now. I do have organic unsulfured blackstrap molasses because I use it when I make my worm tea. So just a bit, maybe a teaspoon for this entire 30 gallons is all I need. And before I say goodbye, I just want to show you this. These are my sweet potatoes that I started from standard store-bought organic sweet potatoes to make the sweet potato slips. And they've gotten out of control. Now, I'm in full sun, so I'm hoping you can see this. But this is one of the 2 containers. And this one over here has been a little bit neglected, although it's reaching down. It doesn't have as many. You'll see potatoes at the top, still completely hard. You can still see the writing because I wrote on them what type of potato they are. And believe it or not, once I break these slips off and plant them, which will be very, very soon, you'll see the slip coming off over there. These potatoes are still completely edible. I love using this method versus the water method. There now, they're combined. And that's one of the reasons you can still eat the potato. But yeah, I just wanted to show you that since I'm bragging about worm bedding. Demonstrating, nothing to brag about there. But I can brag about how beautiful my sweet potato slips are. And we've had the first week since last year without frost. So I should be planting these this week. sweet potatoes are extremely frost sensitive, extremely. Other plants that could tolerate a little frost will wipe these out. Even close to frost will wipe these out. So I have to make sure that we don't have any nights going below 45. And this past week, I think 46 was the lowest night we had. So I'll look at the forecast, and these may go out today. Just a reminder to those who haven't seen or read or heard it elsewhere, I'm going in for a surgical procedure tomorrow. I'm not sure what the outcome will be or what to expect, so I may have some downtime. I don't know. I'll update you when I can. So that's why I'm doing this video today. All right, guys. Oh, here's the bedding, and there's my sweet potatoes, and I'm going in my house. See you later.